Adebayo Kofi Okafor adjusted the strap of his suit as he stepped onto the cracked golden sand of Zera 6, the distant hum of his ship fading behind him. The planet was a vast desert expanse, with towering bioluminescent trees and odd shifting shadows from the distant mountains. The sky was a swirling mix of purple and orange, a sign of an impending storm. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but the heat wasn't the worst part. It was the smell, the acrid scent of smoke in the air, thick enough to sting his nostrils. The fire had already begun when Adebayo's shuttle descended. Thick black smoke choked the air as flames licked at the sky, consuming the small settlement of the Lurn, an alien species with metallic blue skin and long tentacle-like limbs. He could see their silhouettes darting frantically between the burning structures, their cries lost to the wind. "Hold it together, Adebayo," he muttered to himself, adjusting his focus. His mission had been clear when he'd arrived: assess the planet, document the fauna, and make peaceful contact. But this wasn't part of the plan. He activated his communication device, sending a distress signal to the nearest station, but he knew it would take hours before help arrived, if at all. The Lurn were isolated in this part of the desert, with few allies. They had never been keen on outside interference, but Adebayo wasn't someone who could stand by while any people, suffered. He moved toward the center of the settlement, where the largest structure, a spire-like building of organic matter that resembled twisted coral, was already engulfed in flames. His boots crunched against the ground as he moved quickly, his instincts taking over, the training kicking in. It was then that he saw it, a small wriggling figure barely visible through the smoke and heat. A Lurn infant, no older than a few months, was trapped at the edge of the fire, its three wide eyes blinking rapidly as it scrambled away from the inferno. Adebayo's heart pounded in his chest as he sprinted toward the child. The heat from the flames hit him like a wall, but he pushed through it, diving low and grabbing the infant just as the fire crept closer. Its body was delicate, warm to the touch, and as fragile as it appeared, the child's eyes locked with his, wide, dark, and full of fear. "Don't worry, I've got you," Adebayo said, trying to soothe the alien child as he cradled it against his chest. His words felt hollow, but the child's trembling body relaxed against him. He turned and dashed toward the edge of the settlement, weaving between collapsing structures, feeling the heat lick at his back as he ran. The smoke made his eyes burn, but he didn't stop. The cries of the Lurn people echoed around him, but there was nothing they could do. The fire was too intense, too quick. Adebayo was their only hope. As he reached the safety of a small outcrop of rocky terrain, he took a breath, looking down at the infant. The child's tentacles were curled protectively around its body, and its three eyes, though wide with terror, had a glimmer of recognition. Adebayo looked around. He was alone. No one had followed him. The settlement, now a pile of ash and ruin, seemed so distant. Yet in that moment he realized he couldn't just leave the child here, alone and vulnerable. The Lurn would be grateful for the rescue, but would they understand? Would they accept him, a human, a foreigner, saving their young? His chest tightened. He was an explorer, trained to observe and report, not to be a hero. But there was no going back now. "I'll protect you," he whispered to the infant, his voice soft but firm. "I'll make sure you're safe." The Lurn child, now nestled into the folds of his jacket, gave a soft, almost imperceptible chirp, its tiny body relaxing into his warmth. Adebayo's mind raced. The fire still raged behind him, but his mission had shifted from exploration to something much deeper. He hadn't just saved a life. He'd set the stage for something that might change the course of his journey and the fate of this planet. But first, he needed to get the infant to safety. Adebayo sat cross-legged by his small campfire, cradling the infant Lurn gently in his arms. The firelight flickered across his face, casting dancing shadows against the smooth, reddish desert rocks that surrounded him. The infant was quiet now, breathing steadily. The soft whir of its alien respiratory system, the only sound that accompanied the rustling of the wind. Its tiny body was wrapped in one of his emergency blankets, still warm from the heat of the flames. The storm that had threatened Zera 6 had passed, leaving the air heavy and thick with moisture. Adebayo glanced up at the sky. The stars, usually hidden by the storm clouds, now pierced the night like shards of glass, cold and distant. His eyes fell back to the child. Its metallic blue skin shimmered faintly in the dim light. 3 large eyes blinked back at him, their irises dark and dilated. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its tentacle-like limbs were tucked close to its body, yet they looked strangely delicate, fragile, far too fragile for this hostile environment. Adebayo took a deep breath, exhaling slowly. His heart still raced from the adrenaline of the rescue, but now the calmness of the night was settling in. He knew the danger wasn't over. The child had survived the fire, but the journey ahead was still uncertain. The infant's eyes followed him, and for a brief moment, Adebayo felt the weight of the situation settle in. The Learn were not a species known for their trust in outsiders. In fact, most species on Zira 6 weren't. The humans had long been viewed with suspicion, their expansion through the stars leaving a trail of distrust behind them. But this was different. He had saved this child, and somehow, in the process, he had become connected to it in a way he hadn't expected. His mind wandered back to Earth, to his own heritage, his own people. The values of kinship, community, and respect for life had been instilled in him from a young age. The teachings of his ancestors, rooted in the strength and unity of African culture, had guided him through the toughest of times. He had always known that the ties that bound people together were stronger than the forces that divided them. He spoke softly to the infant in his native tongue, his words a mix of Yoruba and the soft lilt of his own thoughts. "Omo, don't be afraid. I'm here. You're safe now." The infant blinked at him, its eyes wide and searching. Adebayo wasn't sure if the child could understand his language or not, but the connection felt real. The slight tilt of its head, the faint chirp it made in response, made him believe there was something more to this encounter than mere chance. Adebayo reached into his pack and pulled out a small vial of water. It was precious here. Water was rare on Zira 6, stored in sealed, heavily guarded reserves by the various tribes that lived scattered across the desert. But he had enough to survive, and if it meant helping the child, he would give everything he had. He held the vial gently, offering it to the infant. The child blinked again, but instead of moving toward the water, it let out a soft, high-pitched hum. The noise seemed to resonate with the air around them, vibrating in a way that Adebayo couldn't quite explain. For a moment, he thought he had imagined it, but the hum lingered, growing stronger, and the infant's 3 eyes began to glow faintly. Adebayo froze, unsure of what was happening. He had heard about some alien species communicating through sound waves or electromagnetic pulses, but this was different. It wasn't just a hum. It was a sensation, something deeper than just a noise. Before he could react, the vibrations stopped. The child's eyes returned to normal, and it let out a small chirp, as if nothing had happened. Adebayo exhaled, feeling a knot form in his stomach. Whatever that had been, it was a sign that the child wasn't just some innocent bystander to the chaos unfolding on Zira 6. There was something more at play here, something important. He had no idea what the future held for him or this child, but he knew one thing for sure. His journey had just become far more complicated than he had ever imagined. In the distance, he thought he saw movement, shadows creeping between the wreckage of the settlement. Adebayo tensed, his hand instinctively reaching for the sidearm at his waist. It was too early for the Learn to have found him. But the darkness was thick, and the air carried the weight of things unknown. The infant in his arms shifted, sensing the change in the atmosphere. It made a soft, almost imperceptible sound, and Adebayo looked down, wondering if it knew something he didn't. "Stay close," he whispered, his voice calm but firm. He didn't know what awaited him in the coming days. But one thing was certain: this planet, this alien child, had become his responsibility now, and he would face whatever came next. Adebayo's eyes flickered between the horizon and the infant in his arms, the weight of what he had just done settling in. He had rescued the child from the fire, but the aftermath loomed. He didn't know what would come next, or how the Learn would react. He had crossed a line by saving their young, stepping into their complex web of customs and politics. And yet, as he sat there beneath the pale stars of Zera 6, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had done something more than just perform a simple rescue. The night stretched on in silence, save for the occasional rustle of the desert winds, which carried with them the heavy scent of ash. The infant shifted in his arms, a faint hum coming from its chest as its large round eyes blinked up at him. Adebayo gently stroked its smooth blue skin, calming it as best he could. Suddenly, the stillness was broken. A sound, like the soft murmur of many voices, reached Adebayo's ears. His pulse quickened, his instincts alert. He shifted to stand, moving cautiously to the edge of the small rock formation he had made camp around. From the darkness of the desert, figures appeared, silhouettes against the dim glow of the wreckage from the fire. Adebayo could see that they were Learn women, their shapes graceful and fluid, their tentacles draped elegantly around their bodies. They approached cautiously, yet there was an undeniable sense of urgency in their movement. As they drew nearer, Adebayo saw the deep concern etched across their faces. He stepped forward, holding the infant protectively against his chest. One of the women, her skin a shimmering deep indigo, came forward, her eyes locked on the child in his arms. "You've saved her," she said, her voice melodic but firm, the syllables carrying a soft but foreign cadence. Adebayo nodded, his voice steady but unsure. "She was in the fire. I didn't think twice." The woman tilted her head, her eyes narrowing slightly as she studied him. "A human?" she asked, her gaze shifting to his face, measuring him as if trying to understand how this could have happened. "Fayosin saved her. A human." Another woman, taller and with markings across her skin that glowed faintly, stepped forward. She was older, her presence commanding. "Your kind has always been distant, watching from afar, never meddling, and yet here you are taking one of our own. Why?" Adebayo's eyes flicked between the two women, uncertainty gnawing at his stomach. He had expected suspicion, maybe even anger, but he hadn't anticipated the mix of curiosity and respect in their voices. He had to speak carefully. "I didn't mean to intervene like this," Adebayo began, his voice calm but sincere. "I was just in the right place at the right time. I saw a child in danger and I couldn't leave her behind. I come from a place where we believe in looking after one another, regardless of who we are." The first woman, who had spoken earlier, tilted her head in thought. "Ubuntu," she said softly, the word unfamiliar yet strangely resonant. "A word from your people, I assume. It means humanity, kinship." Adebayo's heart skipped a beat. "Yes," he said, his voice softening. "It means we're all connected, that we can't ignore those in need no matter where they come from." The second woman, the elder, gave a slight nod, considering his words. Her eyes softened, and there was a flicker of recognition in her expression. "It seems your kind is not so different from ours," she said slowly, her voice tinged with something like understanding. "But that still doesn't explain why you're here. Why you would risk everything for one of us." Adebayo swallowed, his throat dry. He looked down at the child in his arms, feeling the weight of his decision, the responsibility it carried. "I couldn't live with myself if I hadn't done something, if I'd turned my back when she needed help." The women exchanged a look, their expressions shifting, as if they were silently communicating. After a beat, the elder spoke again, her tone changing. "You've done something none of our own have been willing to do. That is something we will not forget." Adebayo felt a knot loosen in his chest. For the first time since the fire, he allowed himself to relax just a little. The Learn mothers were not angry. They were grateful in their own way. "We owe you more than thanks," the first woman said, her voice softer now. "What is your name, human?" "Adebayo Kofi Okafor," he said, his name rolling off his tongue like an old, familiar song. "I'm an explorer from Earth." The second woman, the elder, nodded again. "Adebayo, you are not what we expected. You are not like the others we have met. Perhaps you could help us, not just with this child, but with something much bigger than you realize." Adebayo felt a jolt of surprise at her words, his mind racing. "What do you mean?" he asked, unable to hide the curiosity in his voice. The elder's gaze darkened slightly and her voice dropped to a whisper. "There are those who wish to take from us, who wish to use our planet for their own gain. We've been holding on, but we can't do it alone." Adebayo felt a chill run through him as the weight of her words settled over him. He had come here to explore, to learn. He had never expected to be drawn into something far more dangerous. But he had made a promise to protect this child, and to the Lern who had trusted him with her life. He couldn't walk away now. Adebayo stood silently as the two Lern women who had introduced themselves as Aisha and Tariq studied him. The night was heavy, a weight pressing down on the air, and the child in his arms had fallen into a deep sleep, the occasional soft hum from its body the only sign of life. He could still feel the lingering heat from the fire, its memory cutting through him like a blade. Aisha's voice broke the silence again, low and serious. "You have saved one of our own, Adebayo Kofi Okafor. That is not a small thing, especially for someone not of our kin. But there are questions we must ask. We cannot ignore the weight of what you've done." Adebayo felt a tightening in his chest. He had anticipated gratitude, perhaps even respect, but questions, uncertainty were what the Lern gave him instead. His own people had fought long battles for their survival, and in many ways he had been prepared for conflict. But here, among the ashes of the settlement with the child in his arms, the last thing he wanted was to become a symbol of division. "I understand," he said, meeting Aisha's gaze, though he was unsure if he truly did. "I didn't save her for glory. I saved her because it was the right thing to do." Tariq stepped forward, her long, sleek tentacles undulating around her like waves in the wind. "But do you understand, human, what this means for us?" she asked, her voice calm but sharp. "You have crossed into something far beyond a simple act of mercy. The balance here is delicate." Adebayo raised his brow, his eyes narrowing. "What do you mean by balance?" he asked, not backing down. His instincts told him there was more to this than just saving a life. Aisha gave a slow nod, the expression on her face unreadable, but her voice softened. "The Lern are not a race of simple beings. We are connected to our planet in ways that may be difficult for you to understand. We have lived in harmony with Zera 6 for eons. Our ways are ancient, and our culture is built upon a fragile foundation. Your actions may have disrupted that. I'm not sure yet if it's a disruption we can withstand." A chill ran through Adebayo. The gravity of her words hit him harder than he expected. There was a deeper undercurrent to this planet's people, something that linked them to their world, something older than what he could comprehend. He had been an explorer, yes, but he had never imagined his actions could have such far-reaching consequences. "I didn't mean to cause any harm," Adebayo said, his voice steady despite the unease creeping inside him. "But I can't walk away now. Not after what I've done." Aisha's eyes softened, but there was a tinge of sorrow in them. "It's not just about what you've done. It's about the choices you'll make from here on. The Lern have their customs, their laws. And one thing we hold dear is that no one, especially not an outsider, can ever stand between our mothers and their children." Adebayo felt his heart rate quicken. He knew this moment would come, the moment when his actions would be questioned, where his very existence on Zera 6 would come into conflict with their way of life. But it wasn't just his survival on the line now. He had to think beyond himself. He had to think of the child. "I understand," Adebayo said, his voice lower now, his gaze flicking down to the infant in his arms. He could feel its tiny breath, steady and calm. "But this child needs protection, and I will do whatever it takes to give her a chance." Tariq studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke. "You have good intentions, human. I will give you that. But intentions do not always align with the laws of our people." She turned to Aisha, her gaze intense. "We must take him to the council. They will decide what to do with him, with this child." Adebayo's stomach tightened. He had heard of the council, the governing body of the Lern, a collective of the oldest and wisest among them. To face them was no small matter. It was an honor, but it was also a trial. The Lern were not quick to forgive perceived transgressions, and his presence here, saving their child, might not be enough to protect him. "What will they decide?" Adebayo asked, his voice tight. Aisha's eyes met his once again, and this time her gaze held a strange mix of pity and resolve. "I don't know," she replied. "The Council is merciless when it comes to those who threaten the harmony of 06, but your actions have already set a path. Whether or not you can walk it is up to them, and to you." The words hung heavy between them, like a storm waiting to break. Adebayo knew the gravity of what he had done, but he also knew he couldn't turn back. The child, the learned people, the planet itself, all of them were now his responsibility. Tariq motioned for Adebayo to follow, her long tentacles sweeping through the air as she began to lead him toward the settlement ruins. The wind had died down, leaving behind an eerie stillness. As they walked, Adebayo's thoughts raced. The weight of honor that the Learn spoke of wasn't just a matter of duty, it was a matter of survival. He had made his choice, and now he would face the consequences of that choice. But the deeper he went into the heart of 06, the more uncertain he became. Was he truly ready for what lay ahead, or had he already crossed a line that could never be uncrossed? Adebayo followed Aisha and Tariq through the twisting pathways of the settlement ruins, the remnants of 06's once vibrant structures rising like skeletal remains in the moonlight. The air had cooled since the fire, but it still held a charged tension, like the calm before a storm. Every step Adebayo took felt heavier, the weight of his decisions pressing against him from all sides. They moved quickly, with purpose, as if they knew the urgency of the moment. The infant, still cradled in Adebayo's arms, had fallen asleep again, its small chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. For the moment, it seemed untouched by the chaos of the world around it, a fragile being protected by Adebayo's resolve. As they approached a central clearing, Adebayo could see the outlines of what appeared to be a large circular structure. It was unlike anything he had seen before, a blend of natural and organic materials, the walls pulsating with faint light, almost alive in their design. This was the place the Council met, a chamber that seemed as old as the planet itself. Tariq turned to him, her eyes serious. "This is where the Council will decide your fate, Adebayo. It's a place of great reverence, but also one of great consequence. If they see your actions as a threat to our ways, there will be no second chances." Adebayo nodded, his mind racing. The weight of her words sank in deeper with every passing second. He had known that the Learn had their customs and their rules, but facing their ruling body, the Council, was a whole new level of responsibility. He had saved the child, but now he had to face the political ramifications of his actions. Would they see his intervention as a necessary act of mercy, or would they view it as an infringement on their sovereignty? "Do they always have this much power?" Adebayo asked quietly, his voice low. Aisha glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "The Council is the lifeblood of our people. They decide everything, from the laws we follow to the leadership we obey. They hold the balance of our world in their hands. They have the power to shape the future." The words echoed in Adebayo's mind, a reminder of just how delicate the situation was. He wasn't just up against a single leader or a faction of Learn, he was about to face the collective will of their entire society. As they neared the entrance, two towering Learn guards, their blue skin gleaming in the soft light, stepped forward. Their eyes, large and unblinking, studied Adebayo with an intensity that made his skin prickle. There was no hostility in their gaze, but there was something deeply unsettling about the way they observed him, like he was a subject under a microscope. "State your name," one of the guards intoned in a deep, resonant voice. Adebayo straightened, meeting the guard's gaze without hesitation. "Adebayo Kofi Okafor. I am an explorer from Earth." The guard's expression remained neutral, but there was a brief flicker of something, recognition perhaps, before he motioned for them to proceed. Inside the chamber, the atmosphere was thick, with an ancient sense of reverence. The walls were made of living stone, veins of bioluminescence running through them like lifeblood. The air smelled faintly of earth and moisture, as if the chamber had been carved from the heart of the planet itself. A long table stretched out before them, and at its center sat the Council, an assembly of 8 Lyrn, each older than Adebayo could have imagined. Their skin was even darker, their features more refined, as if their very existence had been shaped by the ages. They sat in perfect silence, their 3 eyes fixed upon him, assessing, weighing, calculating. The moment stretched on, endless, as Adebayo stood before them, the weight of their gaze pressing down on him like the desert sun. He could feel the pulse of the room, the collective power of these beings who had seen millennia pass in the blink of an eye. Finally, one of the council members spoke, her voice as soft as a whisper but sharp as a blade. "A human, an outsider. You have saved one of our young. Why?" Adebayo took a steadying breath, the words that had felt so simple before now heavy on his tongue. "Because it was the right thing to do. Because no one should suffer like that, not when I was able to help." The council member, an elder with markings that seemed to shift in the dim light, regarded him for a long moment before speaking again. "And yet, you have intervened in matters that are not yours to concern yourself with. You have disrupted the balance of our ways. You have crossed a line." Adebayo's chest tightened. He could hear the underlying threat in her words, feel the tension building in the room. This wasn't just about saving a life, it was about the very essence of their culture, and whether his actions would be seen as a blessing or a curse. "I didn't come here to disrupt anything," Adebayo said, his voice calm but firm. "I came to observe, to learn. But I couldn't walk away when I saw something wrong. I saved her because I couldn't do anything else." Another member of the council, a younger Lyrn with sharp angular features, leaned forward, his gaze calculating. "You say you didn't come to disrupt, but your very presence here disrupts everything. The Lyrn do not need outsiders to save us. We have survived for millennia without your help. What makes you think we should accept your interference?" Adebayo's mind raced, but his voice remained steady. "I'm not asking for your acceptance. I'm asking for the chance to do what's right. I don't want to be a threat. I just want to protect the innocent." There was a long silence as the council members exchanged glances, their 3 eyes flicking between each other, as though they were deliberating not just his words, but his very being. Finally, the elder who had spoken earlier leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "You speak with conviction, human, but words are not enough. You will have to prove yourself. You will have to show that you understand the consequences of your actions, that you are worthy of being a part of the delicate balance we have kept for so long." Adebayo swallowed, the weight of her words settling over him like a stone. He knew this moment would define everything to come. The council had made their judgment, and now there was no turning back. Adebayo stood motionless as the council deliberated, the weight of their judgment hanging over him like a dark cloud. He could feel their eyes on him, each member's gaze dissecting him, searching for cracks in his resolve. The words of the elder, spoken just moments ago, echoed in his mind. "You will have to prove yourself. You will have to show that you understand the consequences of your actions." He hadn't realized when he first arrived on Zyra 6 how deeply his presence would stir things up. He was an outsider, yes, but in saving the child, he had triggered something much larger than he could have imagined. The Lyrn were not just a people bound by customs, they were a people bound by power, and that power had its own rules, its own delicate balance. But now, standing before the council, Adebayo had to confront the truth. This wasn't just about his actions. The Lyrn were afraid of what he represented, afraid of the impact his presence could have on the way their world had functioned for millennia. As he awaited their final verdict, the air in the chamber thickened with an undercurrent of tension. He could feel it creeping in from all sides. The way the Lyrn were sitting, still poised, their 3 eyes unblinking, suggested something was shifting beneath the surface, something more than just their suspicion of humans. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, one of the council members spoke. It was the elder from before, the one with the shifting markings on her skin. Her voice was calm, but there was a sharpness to it that cut through the silence. "You claim to have acted out of mercy, Adebayo Kofi Okafor," she began, her words deliberate. "But mercy is a dangerous thing. It blinds those who are not careful, and it blinds those who act without understanding the power they are tampering with." Adebayo felt his throat tighten. "I understand more than you think," he replied, his voice steady despite the nerves that twisted inside him. "I'm not here to take your power. I'm here to protect the innocent." The elder's eyes narrowed slightly, but she did not respond immediately. Instead, she motioned for another member of the council to speak. This one, a younger Learn with sharper, more angular features, leaned forward, his gaze fixed on Adebayo. "The council has discussed the matter at length," he said, his voice cold like steel. "We recognize your actions, but you must understand, everything in our world is interconnected, and by saving the child you have upset the balance. You have introduced an element we do not control." Adebayo opened his mouth to speak, but the elder raised a hand, silencing him. Her voice was firm as she spoke once more. "We do not act on impulse. We do not trust those who do. What you fail to see, Adebayo, is that there are others who do not wish for peace. There are factions within our people who would see the balance disrupted. There are those who believe that our world and our future should no longer be left to chance." Adebayo's mind whirled. What was she implying? There were factions within the Learn. Was there something more to this than he understood? He'd come here with the belief that this was a simple matter of cultural misunderstanding, but now the situation was becoming more complicated by the minute. Before he could respond, Tariq, who had remained silent throughout the proceedings, stepped forward. Her eyes were intense as she addressed the council. "It is true," she said, her voice carrying a weight of authority Adebayo had not expected. "There are those among us who seek to use the unrest as a way to seize power. We have seen the signs. The mining operations that are slowly poisoning our lands, the outsiders who have begun to take an interest in our resources." Adebayo felt a chill run through him. Mining operations, outsiders. Was this the true threat to Zera 6? Was the planet's vulnerability linked to these factions within the Learn? The elder nodded solemnly. "The child you saved is no mere victim of circumstance. She is a symbol of the fragility of our world and the power of those who would use it for their own gain." Adebayo's mind reeled. He hadn't just saved a life. He had unknowingly stepped into a war, one that had been brewing beneath the surface of Zera 6 for far longer than he could have known. The elder's gaze fixed on him once more. "You have no idea what you've unleashed." Tariq's words were softer, but they carried an edge. "We must be careful, Adebayo. There are forces within the Learn who wish to use your presence here against us. We've seen them before. They will stop at nothing to turn this situation to their advantage." Adebayo's heart pounded in his chest. It was becoming clear that this wasn't just a political struggle. It was a battle for the soul of Zera 6. The child in his arms, the very reason he was here, was at the center of it all. And now he was caught in the middle. The elder leaned forward, her three eyes locking onto his. "You've made your choice by saving the child. Now you must decide if you are willing to face the consequences. Are you ready to walk the path that you have set into motion? Are you prepared for the betrayal that is coming?" Adebayo swallowed hard. He had always known that his journey would not be without peril. But this was something else entirely. The stakes had grown too high, the lines too blurred. He wasn't just protecting a child anymore. He was protecting the future of a world that seemed on the verge of unraveling. "I am," he said finally, though his words were tinged with uncertainty. "I didn't come here for war, but I will stand for what is right." The elder nodded, her expression unreadable. "Then you will need to be prepared. The real challenge begins now." Adebayo's heart pounded as he walked alongside Aisha and Tariq through the ruins of the settlement, the weight of the council's decision hanging in the air like a dark cloud. The council had granted him a chance. No promises, no guarantees, but a chance nonetheless. They had warned him about the consequences of his actions, and yet in their eyes Adebayo could see something else, a flicker of hope, buried beneath the layers of distrust and caution. "I didn't come here looking for a fight," Adebayo said, breaking the silence that had stretched between them since the council had spoken. His voice was steady, though there was a hint of frustration in it. "But it feels like that's what I've stepped into." Aisha's eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light of the ruined settlement, flicked toward him. You didn't choose this, Adebayo, but now you must decide what kind of person you want to be. The Lern don't forgive easily, and neither do the forces that threaten us. Tariq, walking slightly ahead, her tentacles swaying gently as she moved, turned her head to speak. You've seen what's at stake. You can't walk away from this. No one can. The ground beneath their feet shifted from dusty earth to a strange, smooth material that pulsed with faint light, a stark contrast to the barren landscape around them. The path ahead of them seemed to stretch on forever, leading into the heart of the planet, a place known only to the elders and the most trusted of the Lern. Adebayo felt the weight of his decision pressing on him once more. The journey they were about to undertake was not one he could have anticipated. It wasn't just about saving the child anymore. It wasn't even just about the Lern's future. This was about the future of Zera 6 itself, its fragile ecosystem, its politics, and the fragile web that held it all together. "You're right," Adebayo said, his voice growing more resolute. "I didn't come here looking for trouble, but I can't back down now. I've already made my choice." Tariq nodded, her face serious. "Then you must understand that the path ahead will not be easy. The forces we face are not just external. They are within our own ranks, hidden among us like shadows in the dark." Aisha's voice was softer now, almost a whisper. "We've seen the signs of unrest for a long time, Adebayo, but we've also seen the power of unity. If we can bring the various factions together, we can stop what's coming. But if we fail, if the Lern splinter apart, Zera 6 will fall." Adebayo's brow furrowed. He had known that the situation was dire, but hearing the weight of Aisha's words made it feel real in a way that it hadn't before. He was not just helping a species, he was standing between them and their survival. The stakes had never been higher. As they continued their journey deeper into the planet, Adebayo found himself lost in thought. He had always been a man of action, trained to solve problems, to face the unknown head-on. But this was something more complex than he had ever faced. The political intrigue, the fractures within the Lern society, the manipulation from factions within their own ranks. It was a puzzle that he wasn't sure he could solve. "The Lern are strong," Adebayo said after a long silence, his voice thoughtful. "But they're fractured. How can we bring them together when they're so divided?" Tariq stopped and turned to face him. Her expression was grim, her three eyes locking onto his. "By showing them that unity is the only way forward. It's not about agreeing on everything, Adebayo. It's about finding common ground. Showing them that together we can protect our world. It's about trust. And trust is something we've lost," Aisha added, her voice distant. "The Lern don't trust easily, especially not after the betrayals we've faced. But we have no choice now. We need each other more than ever." Adebayo glanced down at the child still cradled in his arms, the small life he had promised to protect. He felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility, not just for her but for the future of the Lern, for the fragile peace that hung in the balance. "I'll help you," Adebayo said, his voice steady now. "I'll do whatever it takes to unite the Lern, to stop whatever forces are threatening this planet, but I can't do it alone." Tariq stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone, Adebayo, you never have been." Aisha nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "Together we can make it through this. We can save Zera 6. As they continued their journey into the heart of the planet, Adebayo's resolve solidified. There was no turning back. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and challenges he could not yet imagine. But he had made his choice. He would fight for the Lern, for Zera 6, and for the future that was still hanging by a thread. And as the faint glow of the distant city came into view, Adebayo felt a sense of purpose rise within him, a determination stronger than any fear. The journey to unity had begun. The air was thick with tension as Adebayo, Aisha, and Tariq approached the heart of the Lern's territory. The landscape had changed dramatically as they moved deeper into the planet. Towering rock formations, lush bioluminescent flora, and an eerie, surreal stillness that settled over the environment like a veil. It was as if Zera 6 itself was holding its breath, waiting for something monumental to unfold. Adebayo's boots crunched softly on the ground, the path now slick with dew, the oppressive weight of the coming trial looming over him. He had made it this far, but as they drew nearer to the council's meeting grounds, the truth sank in. This was more than just a political trial. It was a test of survival, not just for him, but for the future of the Liurn. The fires he had once seen now seemed distant, the embers fading into the history of the planet. Now this was his fire. Tariq walked ahead, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. She was always a step ahead, her senses sharp and alert. Aisha, however, walked beside Adebayo, her gaze fixed forward, but her body language softened, perhaps in an attempt to calm him, though her eyes betrayed a deep anxiety. "Adebayo," Aisha began, her voice low, almost a whisper, "this trial will push you to your limits. You will face everything the Liurn hold dear. And you will need to answer for your actions, not just your saving the child, but what it means for the Liurn's future." Adebayo nodded, his mind racing as he tried to process her words. He had always been prepared for challenges. But this was something far greater. The stakes had grown exponentially, and he wasn't just a witness to the chaos anymore. He was at the center of it. His every move would either heal the rift or deepen it beyond repair. They reached a wide clearing where the Liurn had gathered. The heat from the desert sun was oppressive, but the temperature inside the circle of Liurn, who had already gathered around the site, was palpable, thick with distrust, heavy with the weight of judgment. Adebayo's eyes scanned the crowd. They were watching him, and he could feel it in the pit of his stomach. These were the Liurn, the people he had come to know through brief encounters, strong, resilient, and proud. Yet now they felt like strangers, and their faces were not filled with gratitude, but with suspicion. In the center of the circle stood a massive, ancient bonfire, its flames flickering high against the sky. The Liurn were a species that thrived in the heat, that respected fire, but here now fire represented something else entirely: judgment, purification, and testing. The very trial that Adebayo was about to endure. As the group settled in, Aisha placed a firm hand on Adebayo's shoulder. "Remember, this is not just about your actions. This is about what you represent, the change, the disruption you've caused. The fire will test your resolve. Show them you understand what it means to be a part of the Liurn future. But be cautious. There are those here who want to see you fail." Adebayo looked at her, his brow furrowing. "Fail?" Aisha nodded, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "There are factions in our ranks, Liurn who believe the human presence is a threat. They won't be easily swayed by your words or your actions. You must be prepared to face them head-on." The weight of her words hung in the air, and for a moment Adebayo considered turning back, but that was not an option anymore. He had come too far, and this trial was the final test. His only way forward was through it. A deep voice echoed from the crowd, drawing Adebayo's attention. It was the voice of the Liurn elder from before, the one who had initially questioned his motives. "Adebayo Kofi Okafor," she called, her words rolling like thunder over the crowd. "You stand here not as an outsider, but as someone who has crossed a line. Your presence has forced us to question everything we know, and now you will prove your worth to the Liurn people." The crowd shifted, murmurs running through them. The elder's gaze was as piercing as ever, her eyes focused intently on Adebayo. Her next words cut through the air like a blade. "You will enter the fire and you will face your judgment. If you survive, you may yet prove your place among us. But if you fail—" She trailed off, letting the silence hang in the air like a threat. Adebayo felt his throat tighten. The trial of fire wasn't just a test of strength. It was a test of spirit, of resolve. He had seen the power of fire before, both as a force of destruction and a force of renewal. But now he had to face it directly, without any assurance of what would happen next. Without hesitation, Adebayo stepped forward, his boots firm against the ground. The heat from the fire licked at his skin, intense and searing, but he didn't falter. He had faced challenges before, challenges that seemed insurmountable, but this was different. This was his moment to prove himself, not just to the Lion but to himself. He was not going to back down now. The flames roared as he stepped closer, the light casting strange, flickering shadows on the faces of the Lion gathered around. He could feel their eyes on him, their judgment simmering just beneath the surface. With a final deep breath, Adebayo took another step forward, his body tensing as the heat washed over him. Then he crossed the threshold into the flames. Adebayo's body tensed as he stepped forward into the fire's embrace. The heat hit him like a physical force, pushing against his chest, searing his skin. But his resolve held firm. The flames roared around him, their flickering tongues reaching high above. But in that moment, Adebayo felt something shift within him. It wasn't just the fire. This was the culmination of everything he had fought for since he first set foot on 06. This was the test of who he truly was, and whether he could bear the weight of the choices he had made. With each step deeper into the fire's heart, the world around him seemed to blur. The sound of the flames crashing against the air, the heat that threatened to overwhelm him, all of it became secondary. It was as though time itself had slowed, and Adebayo could feel every part of his being focused solely on the task ahead. He could hear the voices of the Lion echoing around him, whispers and murmurs rising from the gathered crowd. Their judgment was still heavy in the air, but it was no longer just about their opinions. It was about Adebayo proving something to himself. He pushed forward, the fire licking at his arms and face, each step a struggle, but his determination never wavered. He had come here to protect this world, to stand with the Lion, and he would not falter now. The flames parted as Adebayo made his way to the center of the fire, where a single stone pillar rose from the ground. The pillar seemed to hum with energy, as though it was alive, waiting for something. Adebayo's chest heaved as he approached it, sweat trickling down his forehead, stinging his eyes, but he didn't stop. He reached out with one hand, his fingers brushing against the cold, smooth surface of the stone. The moment his touch made contact, a jolt of energy shot through him, a surge that left him breathless. For a moment, everything went still. The fire, the heat, the crowd, all of it vanished in an instant. Adebayo's eyes widened as the world around him seemed to fade into a dreamlike haze. He was no longer standing in the heart of the flames. He was standing in a place that felt both familiar and alien. The air was cooler here, and the surroundings were silent, devoid of the intense heat and pressure of the fire. In front of him stood an enormous figure, a being whose presence seemed to fill the entire space. It was neither fully Lion nor fully human, but something in between, something powerful and ancient. Its eyes, glowing faintly, met Adebayo's, and he felt a sense of recognition, as though he had seen this being before, or perhaps always known it. "You seek to protect them," the being's voice resonated through Adebayo's mind, deep and reverberating. "But what do you know of sacrifice, of what it truly means to fight for a cause greater than yourself?" Adebayo swallowed, his voice almost a whisper. "I know what it's like to fight for those who can't fight for themselves. To stand against something that seeks to destroy what's good." The being tilted its head, a gesture that felt like an evaluation. "And yet, you are still a stranger in this land. You cannot fully understand the cost of the choices you have made." Adebayo's heart pounded in his chest. "I didn't come here to destroy, I came here to help, to unite. I know it's not easy, but we can't let 06 fall apart." The being's expression softened, though there was an intensity in its eyes that Adebayo could not escape. "Unity comes at a price, Adebayo Kofi Okafor. To bring them together, you must first understand the depths of their suffering, the weight of their history. Only then can you truly decide if you are worthy of leading them." Adebayo felt a surge of emotion rise in his chest. The weight of everything, the fire, the Lion, his own people, all of it suddenly became too much to bear. His breath quickened, and for a brief moment doubt crept in. But he steadied himself, drawing strength from somewhere deep within. "I understand sacrifice," Adebayo said, his voice firm. "I've seen it in my own people. I've lived through it, but this world, 06, it's worth saving. The Lion are worth saving." The being studied him for a long moment, its glowing eyes never leaving his face. Finally it spoke again, its voice carrying a weight that seemed to echo across the vastness of the space. Then prove it. Show them you understand the cost. Show them you are willing to bear the burden of the fire. Adebayo felt his heart race. The flames around him had returned, swirling in a violent tempest, but now they no longer seemed to threaten him. Instead, they felt like a part of him, a trial he must overcome to earn the trust of the Learn, to earn the right to stand alongside them. He closed his eyes, centering himself. The world seemed to narrow to a single point of focus, the fire and the energy that surged through him becoming one. The flames raged around him, but Adebayo stood tall. The fire was no longer just a test, it was the catalyst for everything that would come after. With a final breath, Adebayo stepped forward, pushing through the flames, feeling the heat, the pressure, and the weight of the challenge. But there was something new in his chest now, something that burned brighter than any fire. It was purpose. As he passed through the heart of the flames, the Learn gathered around him stood in stunned silence. Adebayo emerged from the fire not unscathed but stronger. He had passed the test, not just of fire but of spirit, and with it he had proven something to the Learn. The future of Zera 6 had not been decided by the flames, but by the heart that had endured them. Adebayo stumbled as he emerged from the fire, his breath shallow and ragged. The intense heat of the flames still clung to his skin, his muscles sore from the struggle, but he didn't feel the same burning intensity that had pushed against him in the center of the fire. No, the fire had tested him, yes, but it had also given him clarity. He took a moment to steady himself, standing tall as he faced the Learn who had gathered around. The crowd was eerily silent, their expressions unreadable. Some watched him with a sense of awe, while others, those who still feared the disruption he had caused, looked on with skepticism. He could feel their eyes on him, judging him, weighing whether he had truly earned their trust. The elder who had initially spoken stepped forward. Her gaze was piercing, as always, but now there was something else in her eyes, something like recognition or perhaps understanding. Her voice broke the silence, deep and commanding. "You have passed the trial," she said, her words resonating with weight. "Not because you survived the fire, but because you showed the strength to endure it. You have proven that you understand the cost of what you are asking of us." Adebayo exhaled, feeling the tension that had been building inside him slowly release. The worst was over, but the journey was far from complete. He knew this was just the beginning, and the Learn were not quick to forgive or forget. "I did not come here to take anything from you," Adebayo said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "I came here to protect what matters, to protect your children, your future." There was a murmur through the crowd, a ripple of energy that passed between them like a wave. Some Learn nodded, understanding now the sincerity behind his words. Others remained still, the skepticism still heavy in the air. Tariq stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "It is true what he says. Adebayo did not come to conquer. He came to help us, to help Zera 6. Aisha, standing by Adebayo's side, looked toward him with a glimmer of pride in her eyes, but also with concern. There was still much to be done. The Learn have always been strong, but even the strongest of us must unite when facing a threat. We cannot afford to be divided." Adebayo turned his gaze to the sky above, the faint light of the distant stars barely visible through the smoke from the fire. He had seen the potential for unity in the Learn, but what he didn't know was whether the cracks in their society could truly be healed. Was it even possible for these people, these proud ancient beings, to move beyond the past and build something new? The elder raised her hand, calling for silence. The murmurs of the crowd died down, and all eyes turned toward her once more. "Your actions today have shown us that perhaps there is hope," she said. "But the fire has only revealed part of the truth. The real work begins now. If we are to move forward, we must face what lies ahead together. There is a storm coming, and we must be ready for it." Adebayo's heart sank at her words. He had feared this. He had known, deep down, that the trial wasn't the end, but just the beginning. The Learn were facing something much bigger than internal politics. They were facing a reckoning, a storm of their own making, one that threatened to tear their world apart. "We will help you," Adebayo said firmly, his voice filled with purpose. "I won't turn away. Not now." The elder looked at him for a long moment, her three eyes narrowing in deep contemplation. Finally she nodded. "Then let us begin." The silence that followed was thick with possibility. The Lurn were a proud people, but even pride could be humbled by the truth. Adebayo had shown them that he was not just a hero in their eyes, he was a bridge between two worlds, human and alien, past and future. Whether that bridge could withstand the weight of what lay ahead was yet to be seen, but he had made his choice, and now he would stand with the Lurn to face whatever came next. The air around them shifted, and Adebayo could feel the weight of the Lurn's eyes on him. He wasn't just a visitor anymore. He wasn't just the outsider. He was part of something much bigger, a cause that transcended boundaries, species, and history. They had passed the trial, but the true test was only just beginning. The winds had picked up after the trial, a sweeping gust that seemed to carry the weight of the Lurn's unspoken thoughts across the land. The fire had tested Adebayo, but now, in its aftermath, the true nature of the Lurn's struggle was coming into focus. He had expected challenges, but nothing prepared him for what was unfolding now. The council had granted him the right to stand beside them, but as the elder spoke of the storm to come, Adebayo knew that the greatest trials were yet to come. He sat with Aisha and Tariq in a secluded chamber, a small, quiet place carved into the earth. The walls were smooth, as if shaped by some ancient hand, and the air inside was cool, carrying the faint scent of moss and stone. The flicker of a low, glowing fire cast long shadows across the room, where the three of them were gathered. The others, the council members, had dispersed, leaving the three of them to speak in private. "There is more to this world than you've seen," Aisha began, her voice steady but tinged with an emotion Adebayo couldn't quite place. She was seated across from him, her eyes fixed on the fire. "More than the Lurn, more than you've witnessed in the ruins. Something is hidden beneath the surface, something that could destroy everything if it's allowed to fester." Adebayo leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" Tariq, her face stern, joined the conversation. "There are secrets, Adebayo. Secrets the Lurn have been keeping from themselves, from the rest of the universe. The fire you faced was nothing compared to what's buried deep within the planet." Adebayo's pulse quickened. He had known that Zera 6 was a complex world, with its own mysteries and dangers, but he hadn't expected this. "What's buried beneath the surface?" Aisha glanced up at him, her expression conflicted. "It's not just what's buried, it's what we've been hiding for generations. The Lurn were never the only ones here. There are other beings, other powers, who have had a stake in Zera 6's future for much longer than any of us." Adebayo's eyes narrowed. "You're talking about the factions that want to exploit the planet. The ones that threaten your people." "Yes," Tariq answered, her tone firm. "But it's more than just those factions. There are ancient forces at play here, forces that have shaped the Lurn and Zera 6 in ways we haven't even begun to understand." Aisha shifted in her seat, her eyes darkening. "The Lurn have always been guardians of the planet, but we were not the first. We've guarded something more, something that could change the balance of the universe itself." Adebayo felt the gravity of her words sink in. He had heard whispers of the Lurn's ancient connection to the planet, but he hadn't fully grasped what it meant until now. The Lurn were not just protectors of Zera 6, they were the keepers of a secret that could alter everything. "What are you saying?" Adebayo asked, his voice low, his mind racing. "You've been hiding something. For how long?" Aisha looked away, her eyes filled with a mixture of shame and regret. "For as long as we've known, the Lurn were given this task by those who came before us. There is an ancient power that lies dormant beneath Zera 6's surface, and the factions we've been fighting. They know about it. They want to unlock it." "And if they do?" Adebayo asked, the weight of her words settling over him like a shadow. "If they unlock it, they will control everything," Aisha replied, her voice trembling. "The power beneath Zera 6 is unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen. It is capable of bending the fabric of reality itself." Adebayo sat back, absorbing the enormity of what he had just learned. He had come to Zero 6 thinking he was simply trying to protect a people from destruction, but now it was clear that his mission had become something much greater. He wasn't just trying to save the Liurn, he was trying to stop a force that could unravel the very universe. Tariq spoke again, her voice firm, cutting through Adebayo's swirling thoughts. We must act quickly. There is a group, an underground faction within the Liurn, that has been working with outsiders. They've been trying to tap into this power for years, and they've been getting closer. Adebayo's mind raced. How do we stop them? Aisha's gaze was hard. We can't do it alone. The council may be divided, but there are still those who will stand with us. We need to unite the Liurn, every last one of them, and we need to find the heart of this power before they do. Adebayo nodded, his resolve solidifying. The stakes were higher than he had ever imagined, but now he understood what was at risk. This wasn't just about Zero 6, it was about the balance of the galaxy itself. We'll do whatever it takes, Adebayo said, his voice filled with determination. We'll stop them. Aisha's eyes softened, but there was still a weight behind them, an unspoken fear. I hope you're right, Adebayo, because if we don't, everything we know will be lost. Adebayo sat in the stillness of the chamber, the weight of the secrets that had just been revealed pressing heavily on him. The air around him felt thick, as if the very walls of the room were closing in, holding him in place while his mind raced with the magnitude of their conversation. The truth was clearer now, but so much more terrifying. The power hidden beneath Zero 6, the one that could change everything, was no longer just an ancient myth. It was real, and there were those who were willing to destroy everything to control it. Tariq and Aisha sat across from him, their expressions grave. There was no longer any pretense of hopefulness in the air. The stakes were too high. The future of the Liurn, and possibly the galaxy, hung in the balance. We can't waste any more time, Adebayo said, his voice low, steady, despite the turmoil swirling inside him. He had never faced a challenge this immense before, one that didn't just involve physical endurance, but also the mental and emotional fortitude to stand firm against overwhelming odds. What's our next move? Aisha looked at him, her eyes tired but resolute. The council is divided. Some of them are with us, but there are others who are part of the factions we've been fighting against. We need to reach the ones who still stand with the Liurn, the ones who believe in the future we're trying to build. Tariq nodded in agreement. The underground factions are getting stronger. They've been digging into the heart of Zero 6, trying to unlock the power hidden there. If we don't stop them now, they'll gain control of the power beneath the surface, and they'll use it to tear everything apart. Adebayo's mind raced as he processed the information. He had come here with the goal of helping, to heal and unite a fractured people. But now, the path ahead was much darker. There was no simple solution to the problems they were facing, no easy path to victory. We need to get to the heart of it, Adebayo said, his voice firm. We need to find where they've been digging and stop them before they can unleash that power. If we can't do that, all of this, everything we've worked for, will be lost. Aisha nodded, a deep sigh escaping her lips. The Liurn are divided, yes, but we can still unite them. We must show them the truth, show them what will happen if they fall into the wrong hands. The weight of those words hit Adebayo hard. The truth had to be revealed, but revealing it would come at a cost. The Liurn had always guarded their secrets, and now to save them, Adebayo and his companions would have to expose everything. There would be no turning back after that. What about the outsiders? Adebayo asked, his eyes narrowing as he considered their next steps. The ones working with the underground factions? Do we have a way to deal with them? Tariq's face hardened. They'll fight back, no doubt. They're already entrenched. But we have something they don't. Unity. We have the will of the Liurn behind us. The factions we've been fighting against have only one goal, power. We have to show the Liurn that this fight isn't just about the future of their world, but about the future of every being who shares this galaxy. Adebayo stood up, his heart thundering in his chest. The time for planning was over. There was no more hesitation, no more waiting. The battle was here, and they had to take action now. His purpose had shifted from simply helping the Liurn to now protecting everything he had come to care about. This wasn't just about surviving. It was about ensuring that the galaxy would not fall into the hands of those who sought to control it. "We move out at dawn," Adebayo said, his voice unwavering. "We will unite the Lyran, expose the factions, and stop them from unleashing the power of Zero-6. "We're not backing down, not this time." Aisha and Tariq stood with him, their faces resolute. They knew the risks, but they were ready. The fire had tested them, and now they were prepared for the battle ahead. As Adebayo gazed out at the distant horizon, he could feel the weight of the coming storm. The stakes had never been higher, and the road ahead was uncertain. But one thing was clear: they were ready to face it together. In the quiet before the storm, Adebayo took a deep breath. The turning point had arrived. There was no going back. As the first light of dawn broke over Zero-6, the landscape shimmered with a soft glow. The once oppressive desert heat had given way to the cool, crisp air of the early morning. Adebayo stood at the edge of the settlement, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun was rising, casting a golden hue across the vast, alien terrain. It was a breathtaking sight, one that spoke of the planet's untamed beauty, but it was also a reminder of the fragility of what they were about to face. Behind him, Aisha and Tariq were preparing for their departure. The weight of the coming battle was heavy on all of them, but Adebayo couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was more than just a turning point. This was the beginning of the end, the final chapter in a struggle that had only just begun. "We don't know what we'll face out there," Tariq's voice broke through the silence, her tone as resolute as ever. She was standing by the supplies, checking her gear with practiced efficiency. "But we have to be ready for anything." Adebayo nodded, his hands resting at his sides. "We've come this far. I won't let it all fall apart now." Aisha approached, her movements slower than usual, as if weighed down by the responsibility that had been placed upon her shoulders. "Adebayo," she said quietly, "there's something I haven't told you, something that's been weighing on me." Adebayo turned to face her, his brow furrowing slightly. "What is it?" Aisha hesitated for a moment, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. "The Lyran, they're not all united. Some of them have already made deals with the factions we're fighting. They've already chosen sides. Even now, some of them are making their moves. I'm afraid we're too late." The words hit Adebayo like a blow to the chest. He had known there would be resistance, but hearing it directly from Aisha, someone he had come to trust, made it feel all the more real. The truth was becoming harder to ignore. The Lyran's divisions ran deeper than they had anticipated. "They're already working with the outsiders?" Adebayo asked, his voice low, filled with disbelief. Aisha nodded. "Yes, and they're not just after the power beneath Zero-6, they're after control. They want to dominate the planet, take it for themselves, no matter the cost. We're facing something much darker than we thought." Adebayo's mind raced, but his resolve held firm. He couldn't afford to be distracted by the fear that crept into his chest. The Lyran had their flaws, but they were still his allies, still his responsibility. This was his fight now. He couldn't back down. "We'll stop them," he said, the words steady despite the rising tension inside him. "We've already come this far. We can't let this planet fall into the wrong hands." Tariq glanced up from her equipment, her face grim but determined. "Adebayo's right. We've seen what's at stake. The power beneath Zero-6, if they get their hands on it, everything we've worked for will be for nothing." Aisha looked at him, her gaze filled with a mixture of pride and fear. "I know we've come a long way, but this is bigger than any of us. We have to do what's right, no matter the cost." The weight of her words hung in the air between them, and for a moment Adebayo felt the full gravity of what lay ahead. The journey had brought them to this point, but now they stood at the edge of something far more dangerous, a fight that would not only determine the fate of Zero-6, but the fate of countless lives across the galaxy. The stakes had never been higher. Adebayo took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders, pushing aside the nagging doubt that threatened to consume him. "We have no choice. We move out today. We unite the Lyran, expose the factions, and stop them from unleashing the power. If we don't act now, we lose everything." He turned his gaze toward the path ahead, where the shadows of the day's battle seemed to stretch out before them. The road was uncertain and danger loomed at every turn, but Adebayo knew one thing with absolute certainty: he wasn't backing down. Aisha stepped closer, her hand resting on his shoulder, her voice soft but firm. "Adebayo, I want you to know, I never thought we'd come this far, but we have. And I believe in you. I believe in what we can do, together." Adebayo looked into her eyes, finding the strength he needed in her words. This wasn't just about the mission, it was about the people who had chosen to fight by his side. He could see now that they weren't just a team, they were family, and he would do whatever it took to protect them. "Thank you," he said quietly, the gratitude in his voice undeniable. Tariq joined them, the three of them standing together in the early light, ready to face whatever came next. The weight of the moment wasn't lost on any of them. There would be no easy path forward, no guarantees of success. But as they moved toward their uncertain future, there was one thing they all shared: an unbreakable resolve. "We move out now," Adebayo said, his voice resolute. The silence that followed was not one of hesitation, but of shared purpose. Together they would face the coming storm. The tension was palpable as Adebayo and his companions prepared to leave the heart of Zira 6, the weight of the mission ahead heavy on their shoulders. The sun had fully risen now, casting a golden glow over the desert landscape, but the heat that had once been unbearable felt almost distant compared to the storm of emotions swirling inside him. Adebayo stood by the makeshift camp they had set up, the early morning light casting long shadows behind him. He had always been a man of action, but today the weight of his role in this fight felt heavier than ever. They had come so far, but he could sense that the real battle, the one that would determine the fate of Zira 6, was just beginning. Tariq moved quietly beside him, checking her gear one final time, her focus sharp as ever. Her silence spoke volumes. She, too, felt the gravity of what lay ahead. Aisha, on the other hand, had been unusually quiet. She was standing slightly apart, her gaze distant as she looked out over the horizon. Adebayo took a deep breath, knowing that this might be the last time he would have a moment to reflect before everything changed. His thoughts drifted to Earth, to his people. There was a part of him that had always carried the weight of his ancestors, of those who fought and struggled for survival, for justice, but he also knew that this was different. This world, these people, were not just another mission. They had become his responsibility. "Adebayo," Aisha said, breaking his train of thought. Her voice was quieter than usual, filled with an emotion he hadn't heard before. I want you to know something." He turned to her, the concern in his eyes matching hers. "What is it?" She hesitated, her gaze drifting towards the horizon again, the weight of the world pressing against her. "When we first met, I didn't know if we could trust you. But now I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come. You've given us hope, you've given me hope." Adebayo felt a lump form in his throat. This was the hardest part, the uncertainty of not knowing whether they would succeed, the knowledge that so much rested on their shoulders, yet the simple truth that they had come to this point together. "Aisha," he said softly, "I didn't come here to be a hero. I came here because you and the Liern needed help, but I've learned that this is bigger than me. It's bigger than any one of us. And together we can make it." She nodded, her eyes reflecting the unspoken bond between them. "I believe that too." Tariq's voice interrupted the moment, sharp and clear, cutting through the emotional haze. "We need to get moving. The longer we wait, the more time the factions have to prepare. We've got a world to save." The reminder of their mission snapped Adebayo back to reality. The time for words was over. The time for action had arrived. He met her gaze, understanding that the journey they were on now would define everything to come. "I know," Adebayo said, his voice firm with resolve. "Let's move." They gathered their things, each one of them knowing that the world they were about to face was not the one they had arrived in. The stakes were higher, the consequences more dire, and the fight that lay ahead would push them to the limits of everything they were. As they turned toward their destination, the city of the Liurn in the distance, Adebayo felt a sense of finality. This was the moment they would either win or lose it all. They had come too far to back down now. Adebayo, Aisha said again, her voice softer this time. Whatever happens, I'm glad you're with us. He turned to her, his face filled with quiet determination. We'll make sure it counts. And with that, they set off, leaving the camp behind and heading into the unknown. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but in that moment Adebayo knew one thing for certain. They were not alone. The bonds they had forged in the heat of battle, in the face of impossible odds, would carry them through. As the sun climbed higher, the three of them moved forward, toward the heart of the Liurn struggle, toward the future of Zero 6. And though the road ahead was uncertain, they knew they would face it together. The air was thick with dust, as Adebayo, Aisha and Tariq made their way toward the central Liurn city. The once vibrant colors of Zero 6's desert landscape were now muted by the weight of their mission. The sun hovered just above the horizon, casting long shadows across the barren plains. The path ahead was uncertain, but the resolve in their steps was unmistakable. The trio moved in silence, each lost in their thoughts, the magnitude of what they were about to face pressing down on them. Adebayo's mind raced, the fragments of his journey colliding together, his first steps on Zero 6, the trials, the revelations, the secrets uncovered. All of it had led him here, to this moment. And as much as he had grown, as much as the Liurn had come to trust him, there was still a gnawing question in his chest. Would it be enough? As they approached the city's outskirts, Adebayo glanced over at Aisha. Her gaze was fixed ahead, but her posture was stiff, as if bracing for what lay in the heart of the city. Tariq too walked with a quiet determination, her usual confidence tempered by the weight of their shared responsibility. We'll need all the support we can get, Aisha said, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, but there was a trace of uncertainty beneath it. The factions inside the city won't be easy to sway. There are those who've already chosen their side, those who believe that Zero 6's future is meant to be controlled, not shared. Adebayo nodded, his gaze forward, his eyes scanning the horizon. I understand, but we have to make them see reason. If we don't unite, everything we've worked for will be for nothing. Tariq glanced over at Adebayo, her expression resolute. It's not just about reasoning with them anymore. They're playing a different game, one where power, not reason, is the currency. They all knew it. The factions inside the city were entrenched, their motives twisted by greed, by the hunger for control. Some were still loyal to the planet, to the Liurn's ideals. Others, however, had crossed a line that would not be easily undone. To confront them now would be to face the heart of the very corruption that had poisoned their world. What's our plan once we're inside? Adebayo asked, his voice calm but carrying the weight of the decision ahead. Aisha took a breath, her gaze shifting toward the distant city walls. We'll have to reach the council, convince them that the power they've hidden for so long can't be unleashed. Not by the wrong hands. We expose the factions for what they are, traitors to the Liurn. Tariq nodded. But we have to move quickly. Every minute we waste is another minute the factions use to further their hold. Adebayo felt a surge of determination. The fate of Zero 6 rested on their shoulders, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't do it alone. He looked at his companions, the bond between them forged through fire, through struggle, and through shared vision. We'll make it, he said firmly. We'll unite the Liurn, expose the factions, and stop them from tearing this world apart. As they drew closer to the city, the towering spires of the Liurn's capital came into view. The architecture was unlike anything Adebayo had seen before. Organic, flowing structures that seemed to pulse with life, a blend of nature and technology. Yet, as beautiful as the city was, there was an undeniable sense of foreboding in the air, a dark energy that hummed just beneath the surface. They approached the gates where guards stood, their expressions unreadable. Adebayo felt his pulse quicken. This was the moment that would define everything. He wasn't just a visitor anymore. He was a key player in this world's future. Stay focused, Tariq murmured, her voice low. This is where it all changes. Adebayo nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. The door to the city opened slowly, creaking on its ancient hinges, and as they passed through, the reality of what lay ahead hit him hard. The city wasn't just the heart of the Liurn, it was the battleground for everything they had fought for. Unity, freedom, the future. They walked into the city together, knowing that the decisions they made in the coming hours would shape the future of Zero 6, and perhaps the entire galaxy.